All right, so tonight is the finale of Bachelor in Paradise, and I just call BIP the ultimate shit show, and it has certainly lived up to that title. But as per usual, I like to talk numbers and then possibly even money associated with numbers, and that's what we're going to do with Paradise. I'm not going to get into drama, but we're going to talk about the black and white, the numbers, and there's no one better to do it than Suzanna, who is the creator of Bachelor Data. If you haven't seen this Instagram, it's unbelievable. I mean, every bit of detail as it relates to the analytics with contestants from Paradise and their growth. Even I just saw how many times certain words are used and bleeped. Suzanna is pumping this out. It's Suzanna, the manner in which you're pumping this out, the speed in which you're pumping it out is blowing me away. I even commented on one of your photos, like, how are you getting this out so quickly? So first of all, thank you for talking to me on Bachelor in Paradise finale night. And tell me how everything so far has been going with Bachelor Data, because it's been fun to watch.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think this season has been one that has been so interesting to analyze, mainly because up until this year, I've never analyzed Bachelor in Paradise, just Bachelor and Bachelorette.
Okay.
Um, but as far as things really changing, because numbers and data, seeing new trends appear, I feel like this season it is just wild.
What so I'm curious about that. So what is so different from this Paradise than when you have analyzed Bachelor and just Bachelorette?
Well, I think the one that's most stark is, the conversation around Instagram followers. We've always
Yeah.
heard they're here for the wrong reasons. They're not here for so and so. And that's been a common trend since like the 2000s when the show was on. But this season, they're really tackling the conversations around screen time, around Instagram data, and really diving into the ethics of going on the show for followers or not. And then we're seeing the fallout of it on a bigger scale than we've ever seen.
Yeah, that it's been an interesting, obviously the Brendan Piper situation, and it's interesting how you have actually shown that when that conversation about followers comes up, they're actually losing more followers than they even started Paradise with. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we're actually seeing I feel like the viewers are taking control of what happens.
Yeah.
They're really talking now about this person, like everybody needs to unfollow them because of blah, which, I think it's a tough narrative, but I think hearing that versus in the past when contestants would instead get hounded with like hate and,
Yeah.
nasty DMs, the conversation flowing now to just unfollow them. Just stop giving them that support. I think it's a different trend that we just haven't seen so far.
Yeah, and this is one thing that I talk about often is that when you're unfollowing someone like that, you're literally instantly taking money away from them. Because I think what we've now seen is like in the mid 2000s, I'm sorry, like 2015-ish, people are like, what is social media? And then people would get made fun of because they're like, oh, you're posting tummy tea and stuff. And I think, one thing I've been trying to do at least is really just open the curtains to this industry. And you quickly start to realize that those tummy tea ads are what a lot of people make in 6 months of work. And then they're like, holy shit, people really are going out for the wrong reasons because of the monetization behind it. So I have a ton of questions about the numbers and analytics before I do it, because I just dove right into it because I get excited about this stuff. Susanna, tell me, when did you actually start analyzing The Bachelor and Bachelorette? And what is your professional background that gives you the strength to operate Excel the way you do and be able to get these numbers derived into an understandable, digestible, either picture or chart, et cetera?
Yeah, so I started this project in December 2019, about 3, 4 weeks before Colton season started. So at the time, I used to be an elementary teacher, and I was promoted from digital learning specialist to technology director. And it was a big jump for me. And I noticed that the district that I was working in, so many people were coming to me expecting that I knew how to use Excel. And I could just do like equals sum and just like drag. And I was like, I know how to use Excel. I didn't. I did not know how to use Excel at all. So I decided to start tracking Instagram followers because every YouTube video I found online was so boring, so dry. I was like, let me just start tracking this and posting about it online for other people to see so I can play with the data and learn. So that started on the Bachelor's subreddit, and I'd post there. And then about a month before the world shut down, I started an Instagram account with the hopes of pushing myself more on the data visualization front. So it's been
Yeah.
a really fun journey of self-teaching and just learning everything about Excel, and making people like data who normally don't like it.
Yeah. And so what was I love exactly what you're doing. That's similar to what we're doing with Restart. And a different format is where how do you make finance and how do you make career navigation and money just some of the most important things in the world that have a huge impact on overall happiness, just kind of sexier and just easier to understand. Like how do we put it in a way that like people want to learn? And I think when you drive analytics and tie it to people's favorite show, it kind of creates that spin too. So for you and anyone that is maybe thinking about getting into Excel, like what did you do to get your Excel speed at the rate it is today? And then the golden question I have is where do you actually get the information? Like how do you know to the follower count of like 1,225,045? Like how do you know the exact information?
Yeah. So for me, honestly, especially working in education, the data that we primarily work with that's massive and used frequently as a talking point is state testing data. And most people haven't seen what that spreadsheet looks like, but it's horrible. It's like over 100 columns of data, and none of the headers make any sense. So it's not fun to play with. So, what I suggest people is find data that you enjoy working with. And for me, I like The Bachelor. So I analyze The Bachelor. And, I like it sounds silly, right? And when I first started this project, like, a lot of people would be like, wait, you're analyzing The Bachelor. And I'm like, yeah, it's numbers. Like Instagram followers are, like you said, they're equal to money and it's a legit career. One that most people make more than they could in their day jobs. So it's fun to work with. So that's my biggest advice is find something that you enjoy, be it WWE, be it knitting,
Yeah.
like whatever it is. But for me collecting it, I actually open up every single profile at 8 p.m. every night and you hover over the number so you can see that 1,260 all the way down to that number. And we write it down.
Oh, you can I didn't even know that. So you have to obviously be on a computer as opposed to the app.
Yeah, the app won't show it. And once you hit like 100,000 followers, it starts going down to like the hundreds place and you can't really see it on the app.
Gotcha. And do you have a whole team that helps you with this?
No.
You're
So
doing this all
I've
yourself.
I have two people now. So I have one person who helps solely with collecting the screen time data because that, especially this week with Bachelor in Paradise,
Yeah,
we're only like 75% into collecting it because it takes hours. But
sure.
the Instagram follower accounts, I have a family member who helps me. So we kind of switch off on who collects it.
That is so cool. And I want to go back to Colton season here in just 1 minute. But before I do, I know this project's been fun. You have me and my eyeballs on it every day. But have you been able to monetize it all from this, or do you have a plan in place and how to monetize from all the work you're doing?
Yeah. So we used to have a Patreon and we just shut that down this summer just because of the amount of time it was taking. And it felt weird to kind of hold back a lot of data from people and put it
Sure.
there. So we actually launched a course in July teaching
Cool.
people how to use Google Sheets. And then we have an Excel version coming out this October using our data. So it takes you from this is a cell, and this is why it's called A3, all
Hmm.
the way up to pivot tables, VLOOKUP, really advanced conditional formatting. We go into it all. So it's basically like taking an Excel class in college, but fun.
Yeah, and if anyone, I don't care what industry you're in, I don't care what you do. I think knowing Excel will behoove you just for how you can organize your own life. And so a course like that, I think is unbelievable. So congratulations, and anything we could do to help promote that or offer to our Restart members that course or discount, we'd love to do that. I think it's really cool. Okay, I got to get into Colton season. So you talked about Colton season. For those who don't know, Colton was on Becca's season, and Colton and I were both on Becca's season as castmates. And so then before that, they decided who was going to be the Bachelor, and Blake interviewed, and I interviewed, and Colton interviewed, and they selected Colton. And what was so fascinating about Colton season and Hannah Brown season is that we all noticed as cast members, because you are paying very close attention to this, whether people admit it or not, you are the follower count. The follower counts on Colton season and Hannah Brown season were fucking insane. You got Tyler Cameron coming off with 2 million followers, Pilot Pete with 1 million, Colton's up to 2, Hannah Brown's the most followed bachelorette in the history. And we're like, wait a second, we thought this show was actually pulling back ratings wise, and the actual amount of people that are watching the show is decreasing. How is this happening? And all of a sudden, I don't know if it's the pandemic. I don't know if it's people's interest. I don't know if it's the sensitivity of all the moving issues within The Bachelor, but ratings have obviously dropped a little bit, but you would know better than me, not dramatically. And followers are nowhere to be found. No one is getting the numbers that were received in the past. And even Becca's season was a really low following season. curious, have you seen that trend and what do you attest it to?
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing it. We're not celebrating as many 1 million. We call it 1 million follower club whenever people hit it. But I think it's a variable of a few things. So the biggest thing that we can rule out first is this started during Tasha and Caitlin hosting or not, yeah, Tasha and Caitlin hosting Claire and Tasha season. Said that wrong. Chris Harrison
Chris Harrison.
hosting
Yes.
Claire and Tasha's season.
Yes.
So we saw the decrease in Claire and Tasha's season before anything around the controversy started. So I think that's the biggest thing that we can rule out is that there wasn't a significant change between that season, which was also airing at a weird time in the year,
Sure.
and the following season with Matt James, where we saw a lot of those controversies. So I think it's easy to rule that one out. But I do think a lot of people's habits changed during the pandemic. And it also doesn't help that TikTok got so big and it's pulling people away. And I mean, I think I saw a stat the other day that now people are spending more time on TikTok than YouTube, which is huge because YouTube's been the big player in the game for decades now.
Right.
So I think that is also a big factor to think about it. But also during the pandemic, people were stuck at home and all you could do is watch TV and work. And that was it, So I think it's important to acknowledge that there were a lot of other good shows that came out. Love is Blind, like Netflix is just chugging out shows. HBO's chugging them out now. So it's the same thing that's been happening for decades now. There's more shows coming out. There's more streaming happening. And a lot of people are moving towards streaming. If you look at Love is Blind, for example, it's on Netflix. And the people on that show, they all have over 1 million followers, like almost all of them.
On Love is Blind.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So I think it's interesting. I think it's people are just moving around and watching different shows. I think also, The Circle just came out season 3.
Yeah.
And whenever I was watching The Circle, this is my personal opinion on this one. The Circle is generally a very positive show. And The Bachelor has a lot of villains, a lot of drama, which makes me wonder if people's viewing habits around wanting to watch things that are more positive, especially in the last 2 years, having been such a difficult time, I think that also might be impacting it.
I think that's 100% impacting. I've talked to some podcast executives who said during the true crime is one of the number one genres of podcasts. Podcast executive was saying during the pandemic, true crime got crushed, absolutely pummeled because we were living in a state of mayhem and people didn't want to take their extra time to then release their reality into another state of mayhem. At least that was his conclusion. I could talk to you all day about this because I find it so fascinating how all these shows work. Survivor, people don't really pick up followers. Amazing Race, they don't pick up followers.
Big Brother.
Right? Big Brother is the craziest thing in the world to me because you have almost 3 episodes, 2 to 3 episodes a week on the biggest network and 24/7 live stream for 3 months. And they're not breaking 100,000 followers. Do you think that has to do with the demographic of the audience?
Well, actually, I tried to start tracking Big Brother a few years ago when I started this project.
Yeah.
And interesting enough, I went to the Big Brother subreddit. And the first post I did where I was like, hey, here are their Instagram follower accounts with the season starting. It got like downvoted into oblivion. And people are like, people can't go on the show for followers. Like, we don't want that narrative. And they really pushed against it. I was like, all right, I'm out. Like, I won't go there.
Interesting.
I think it's different. Like each show, I think it's interesting to see how people rally around contestants and support them in different ways, especially when they go on reality TV shows, which we all know they go on shows for fame. If they weren't, their Instagram profiles would be private.
Every person on Paradise, every human that touches the sand in Paradise, whether you love that person or you hate that person, is going on that show. The percentage may change, but is going on that show for followers. And there's not one person that goes on reality TV these days that isn't going on show for followers because it's starting to open the career that's behind it. And we talked about this earlier, but people would say like, oh, why aren't you going back to work? Why aren't you going back? You're not going back to work because in 2 weeks you just made what you made in your annual salary. And people still are trying to grasp that.
I don't think they're bad people for that either.
No.
I think it's the dream for so many people to not have to wake up and leave their families every day to go to work, or people without families to be able to like live your life more and travel and see more. That doesn't make you a bad person.
I completely agree with that. And think about what you do or what each individual does every day if you're motivated, right? You're finding ways to advance your brand, your network, hopefully maybe get promoted, increase your skill set and acumen. Like you're doing all these things to put yourself, your family, maybe the generation after you in a better position. So I never understood when people would give all these people so much shit for trying to take a huge risk, by the way, a huge risk to go on reality TV to put their life in a better position. Because every day, whether you're a server at a restaurant or you work as a car mechanic or I was a banker, all you're doing is strategically thinking about what you could do to put your clients and yourself and your position, your career in a better spot. It's the same thing. I've also heard that I've had buddies. I always like to play devil's advocate when I argue with people, and my buddies will tell me about. They'll be like, "Oh, I've heard them say like, oh, that person's a ladder climber or something like
Clout
that." I'm blanking.
chaser.
What is it?
Clout chaser.
Clout chaser or a ladder climber. Like they'll only like network with people that are going to help them. I always play like the advantage that I'm like, that person is so now you're going to give them shit because they're trying to put themselves in a position to be successful because they might have to work for it or they weren't born with the last name in which they have it. I never totally understood that. Okay, so you attested to that every show is different, every audience is different, and that's why the followers for every reality show is just all over the place.
I
The
think
other
so. Yeah,
okay.
I think it is a big piece of it.
Okay. And the other thing I would love if maybe we could work on a project together. But people will always ask me about what is your follower count and how much can you make with that? And it's really interesting to learn now that I work directly with brands because I manage myself. A lot of these brands don't give a shit about your followers. And I know people that have 300,000 followers that could charge over 100 grand for a social deal. And I know people that have 2 million followers that can't charge 3 grand for a social deal. And it's because the companies have gotten a lot smarter to use tools to analyze all the other things with the followers, which is the demographic, the makeup of the follower, how engaged the follower is, how many comments they get, how many likes they get, how often they're posting, all these crazy analytics. Have you done any work to correlate at all monetization with social media followers at this point, or is that something you're thinking about?
I mean, I think it's interesting to look at, but I think it's so different for every industry. So like if you look at Ali Fedotowsky, for example,
Yeah,
former Bachelorette does really well on social media. She's been able to sustain that over the last few years since her season. But her demographic are, I think it's called like the mommy influencers, like the ones
sure.
who really target more like I'm a mom and I'm here and I'm going to plug those types of products and that type of
Yeah,
lifestyle. And then you have the people that are more around clothing. Then you have people who are in like finance, which is also what we're seeing like not only you, but Matt James go down that route. I think it's different for everyone, but I think it would be really interesting if there was some type of database out there that really looked at that because this
yeah,
isn't public information. The companies won't say how much they charge or how much they pay people.
yeah,
And the contestants, are not very transparent about that. And
yeah,
I don't think it's wrong that they aren't, but I think it's hard to analyze because that data isn't out there. But I
yeah,
think it's very different. I mean, I have friends that are influencers outside of the Bachelor world. And
yeah,
I think micro influencers are very much on the up and coming, where it's,
sure.
people with under 100,000 followers that have a really strong following base. I think
Hmm.
it's just so many variables to be able to say, like, this is what's going to give you a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. There's so many moving parts to it, and it's tough to really identify who's doing what and how. But it's really cool, I think, in my opinion, to see people that have gone on any show or built a platform from any which way and have then been able to like pivot into their brand. So Allie's a great example with you said like the mommy group. I think you look at like Caitlin's group. I see a lot of like 20-year-old women that are kind of a little bit lost, looking for inspiration or looking for a community and friends and trying to just have fun. Like it's a totally different group with Caitlin's, and I think it's just all over the place. Like Jillian Harris has done an unbelievable job cultivating her brand and building a community around that. It's fun to watch it. I want to go back to one more point too, is with Dancing with the Stars. That's another show you're on 2 times a week, and people just don't gain really a following on that show too. And it's more popular from a total viewing perspective. It's greater than almost any show, and I think it's probably the demographic watching it. I didn't know if you had an opinion on that.
Yeah, I think so too. I just started tracking Dancing with the Stars this season, and I'm not
Okay.
seeing a ton of growth yet. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, the big shots like, JoJo Siwa, she's just flying with followers. I
Sure.
think a lot of people started following Cody Rigsby because his partner and now him both got COVID.
COVID.
I think really what it comes down to with followers across the board, whatever
Yeah.
show it is what's the storyline that's going to make somebody want to follow you. So like Hannah B that you mentioned, like she's
Yeah.
skyrocketed. She's one of the few that didn't stop skyrocketing after her season ended. And why was that? It's because her and Tyler ended the after the final rose with, you want to go get a drink sometime? And everybody's like, of course we're going to follow them now to see what happens. And then they analyze like every single moment on social media trying to figure out if they were together. And then the quarantine crew happened and they just continued to just climb up with their followers.
Those three are great marketers. I give them credit. Hannah, Tyler, and Matt are brilliant, brilliant individuals. Okay, a few more questions for you, then I'll let you go because I know we only have you for a certain amount of time and we're almost there. How often? So one of the things we talk about, and friends will ask me, they say, how do you continue to grow your social following? And I will literally say the goal for anyone that gets off these shows is that you're just trying to sustain, because the pinnacle of your awareness 100% is when you're on the show and just off. And so if you can even sustain where you're at from when the show ended, you've done yourself a great job. And if you can grow, good for fucking you. So what have you seen since 2019 as far as a trend goes from people getting unfollowed after they're on the show?
Yeah. So I think the ones overall, it's those who niche down and find a niche, they're able to really sustain and also grow a little bit. But it's pretty common about a month after the series ends or the season ends. That's when you start to see people losing followers. So throughout a season, you'll see every week like a lead is gaining anywhere from 50,000 to 100,000 followers a week. But then after the season ends, they'll drop anywhere from like 20,000 followers to sometimes like Matt James, we saw him drop over 100,000 followers.
Wow.
And I think, but I don't think it's a bad thing. I think like Matt, for example, he's a really strong example of this happening. Is he started to niche down. He started to really work on his ABC food tours. He started to talk a lot about Bitcoin and everything in that world. So he started to niche down. So having a million followers, yeah, it's cool to like have that number on your profile, but
Right.
he's trying to find a place to go into so that he can sustain his brand afterwards. At least that's what it seems.
No, that's 100% accurate. And the thing is, and I think I might even heard Matt mention this before. Like, I'm going to live my life the way I live it, and I'm going to do it authentically. And if people don't want to follow along that's fine. Eventually, I'm going to lose them anyway, because I won't be able to sustain a life that I can't live to just do what I want. And so therefore, the people that stick become more engaged, and the people that left likely with time would have left anyway. So yeah, that's a whole fascinating conversation. Whether it's guest appearance, or it's just this season of Paradise, from the data you've analyzed, what has been some of the most surprising takeaways from the rate at which people follow or are unfollowed?
Okay, so number one, being a host, it's great for you. Not necessarily being a guest, because we can see, like Wells is a great example. On some seasons, when he's a guest host, he'll gain like 4,000 or 5,000 followers, but then on other seasons, he'll actually lose followers. So
Interesting.
Guest appearances can go either way, but I think what's important in that is when you go on as a guest, are you launching a book soon? Are you a musician? Is Spotify increasing? It's not always about the Instagram followers there is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
But as far as, growing a lot, being a host is great. The lead and making it far are really the sweet spots, but you don't necessarily need to be in that position. Like we saw in Matt's season with Abigail, she got a ton of screen time at the beginning of the season because she was first impression rose, never got a one-on-one date, kept growing the whole season, even though we were hardly seeing her. And then we're seeing it now, Bachelor in Paradise. We saw her at the beginning and she's kind of been a ghost with screen time, but she's almost gained like, I think 80,000 followers this season.
Interesting. The only takeaway I have from people that do well, that are on the show, being a cast member, former cast member, is that the more, I don't know, I guess the more authentic, real, and likable your story is, the more followers you'll get. It just always seems like the guys are I'm just gonna say guys, the guys in this situation, because I can relate to, that are like the douche bags. Like you watch him, you're like, the guy's a douchebag, he's a dick, he's arrogant. They never seem to take off in following. And so do you agree with that conclusion?
Yeah. And I think it's very much compared to your season and when it aired. Because if you look at like Chad Johnson, who was a villain on his season,
Yeah.
if you look at his number standalone, like siloed, you'd be like, oh, wow, he gained a ton of followers, but he didn't compared to other people on his season.
Gotcha.
So I think the
Okay.
sweet spot is be likable, make it as far as you can without getting involved in the drama, unless you're just like a narrator in ITMs narrating what's happened.
I love it. This is such a fascinating topic and such a relevant one to what is going on in the social media space, the monetization behind it, and it's really fun to see the work you're doing, Susanna. We're going to keep following all your work, and I think we're going to find some ways to hopefully work together more, especially as we're kind of cracking this vault into understanding and identifying like where money is made as it's associated with followers, because there's a huge discussion. I mean, everyone's getting pointed at. Obviously, certain people are going to be manipulated or at least targeted for being those people for followers. But the same people that are targeting those people are the same people that are doing shit every single day to grow their following, whether it is someone from a podcast that's chirping. They're using that line to grow their following and their podcast to make more money. And they're attacking the person that's doing the thing on the show to do the same thing. So it has been so much fun, Susanna. Where can people find your Excel model and you and everything else that you guys have going on at Bachelor Data?
We are on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Bachelor Data, and our course is bachelordata.thinkific.com.
So cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure speaking to you. I have a feeling I'm going to be up like in the middle of the night. It's be like 4 a.m. because I'm terrible at sleeping. And I'll be thinking like, oh, I should have asked this. So if something comes to mind, I'll let you know because I find your work so fascinating. Congratulations on everything.
Thanks for having me.